because at the time he was indigent and no one in the family had access to $100,000+ for retainer for a lawyer to take the case. At the time, his attorneys, the public defenders, they don't take anything away from them. I think there's a great group of people, but I just think, in my personal opinion, that sometimes they're overworked, and it's just a matter of saying, let's get this thing pushed through the system and let's continue to move on to the next case. For some, just in terms of professionalism, I feel that it's just sort of a springboard to the ultimate where they want to go. So I get the legal experience, but I want to then move on to something else. A public defender by the name of Neil Hamilton took his case, and the first thing that he said to my brother, which my brother shared with me, was that, what kind of story are we going to come up with? As if he did not believe him initially out the gate. So there wasn't even an opportunity to begin the ball rolling to try to defend his innocence. And so I'm already operating in the auspices that you're innocent until proven guilty. He had already come with the story that you're guilty because they're saying this bite mark is yours. My brother said, the story we're going to come up with is you're going to defend me. I didn't do it. I'm not guilty.
She was an attorney first, and she represented me, and then they co-represented me, and then she disappeared, and it seemed like he did too. So he didn't do anything in the case, but it was all about money, so they took a lot of money.
The reason Santiago won post-conviction is because the attorney, the trial attorney, made a unilateral decision not to have him testify, and thereby violating his constitutional right, the right to testify. And that is what won his freedom.
My people, they paid for him. But he sold me out. Because he went right along with them, everything. They said, he agreed with it. Well, so he didn't do his job, because after I got in the prison, I got to learn more and more about my case, and I see he did a whole lot of stuff which he should have did much better. Yes, I went to the law library and educated myself, learned all about the cases, and I got so good they started calling me a jailhouse lawyer.
I was naive to the system. I told him I needed a lawyer. He contacted a family friend who recommended this one lawyer who happened to be an expert DUI lawyer. Had the sentencing phase, and my attorney didn't do any prep for mitigation, aggravation phase, and told me when I came in and sat down, I'm going to put you on the stand, and I said, look, you can put whoever you want on that stand. I'm not getting back up in front of that prosecutor. So he just stands up and tells the judge, no mitigation, Your Honor, and sets back down. So I looked at him, and they got up and gave their closing arguments. My attorney's argument was about a paragraph long. The prosecutor stood up there and talked for about 30 minutes. The jury went out, came back 10 minutes later with the death penalty. Again, I heard my mother scream behind me. And it was just such a surreal moment that, being naive to the system, and all of a sudden you're convicted of this double murder and they just gave you that death sentence. They took me off to prison. I still thought, well, I got an appeal. First question I asked my lawyer, how long will an appeal take? He said a year. Well, it took 4 years. And during those 4 years on death row, I got into the legal law library and I started reading up on ineffective assistance of counsel and what my attorney didn't do. And he had no expert testimony. He didn't do any investigation. He had no investigator. He didn't properly cross-examine witnesses. He didn't even try to impeach the witnesses.
I had an attorney. My mom paid for this attorney. She sold her house and sold her car to afford this attorney. And this attorney just from day one wanted me to plea out to some type of deal. So we really didn't have the proper representation that I should have had. The ineffective counsel that I had at the time, my attorney, never presented the DNA to the courts or entering it in as evidence. Not necessarily fighting for me or going and investigating and visiting the crime scene or the supposed crime scene and actually seeing how this place looked and the things that this girl had accused me of, how that was actually impossible.
I think it's really naive to think that only, the only guilty pleas that we get are from people who are truly guilty. Sometimes people plead guilty if they're innocent because they're terrified of the possibility of getting 30, 40, 50, 60 years or life sentence in prison if they don't take an offer for lesser time. We know of numerous cases of this nature. There have been a handful of well-known Illinois DNA exonerees in our state who have walked free despite having pled guilty first. Nationally, Brian Banks is a great example.
Brian definitely represents the all-American dream.
The second deal was 18 years, and the third deal was 9 years. And my mother and I both said no to all of these deals that were coming my way because I was innocent and because I knew that I didn't belong behind bars. Well, a year into fighting this case, as I sat in a courtroom waiting to be seen in front of a judge, I was there that day to select a jury to go to trial. I was facing 41 years to life in prison, 17 years old now, and I had already been in jail for a year. And as I sat in that cell waiting to be seen in front of a judge, I was pulled out of this holding cell and put into an interview room. My lawyer came rushing into this room, and she sat down and looked at me from the other side of this glass, and she said to me, "Brian, I just came up with this amazing deal with the district attorney, and this is the deal that you have to take. I know I've been presenting all these other deals to you, but Brian, this is the deal that you have to take, and it's a good deal. Let me tell you what it is. If you plead no contest to one count of rape, you will go on a 90-day observation at Chino State Prison. And during those 90 days, you'd be interviewed by a psychologist and counselor, and they would determine on the ladder system whether you receive probation, 3 years, or 6 years in prison." Brian, listen, I promise you, and I guarantee you that you will get probation. At the most, you'll get a 3-year sentence. You already have a year time served. That means you only do about 18 more months. You can still be young and get out and play football, enjoy your family and your freedom. But Brian, listen to me and look at me when I'm telling you this. If you walk into that courtroom and you choose to fight this case, as soon as you walk into that courtroom, they will see you guilty because you're a big black teenager. And more than likely, this jury will be an all-white jury. And as soon as you walk in there, they will see you as a guilty man. So I'm asking you, do you want to take this plea and get this probation in 90 days, or do you want to risk it all and risk life in prison? And at the age of 17, I sat there and everything in me came out in tears. I cried and I asked why. And I asked, are you sure? And I asked, is there any other possibility? And I was told no. And so I said, okay, well, let me speak to my mom. She's on the other side of this wall here. Let me just get some advice from her, and maybe I can make this decision a little better. My lawyer looked at me and said, no, you can't talk to your mom because you're in adult court now, and so you need to make an adult decision. I had 10 minutes to make this decision. This wasn't something that I was allowed to go back to my cell and sleep on it and think about it. This wasn't a situation where I was able to speak to my mom or family or anybody and get advice on what I should do. I had 10 minutes to make this decision, 17 years old. To this day, I'm 28. To this day, the hardest decision that I've ever made in my entire life. Do I take a deal for something I didn't do? Or do I risk life in prison for something that I didn't do? I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to be free. I just wanted to play football. I didn't want to be in jail anymore. I just wanted to go home. And so at the age of 17, I took this deal. And as I walked into the courtroom, I remember walking into the courtroom and my family sat in the audience and they were waiting for me to come in and select this jury. Instead, I walked in and stood in front of a judge and said, I plead no contest. And I'm ready to accept whatever punishment you have for me for a crime I didn't commit.
Our criminal justice system is to the point where an innocent person would plea. I think it's so important that his story is heard because of that. And if you think about that for a second, that someone would sit and make a business decision to plea to something they didn't do, and that's where our sentences have gotten us. In California, you are risking spending the rest of your life in prison when you don't take a plea bargain. And when you're a 17-year-old kid and you're arrested when you're 16 and you're sitting in a room by yourself and a lawyer is telling you, you want to roll the dice in the criminal justice casino, go right on in there. It's an all-white jury and you're looking at 44 years in prison. Or take this deal and you might get probation. That's a broken system. It's clearly a broken system when people will choose to plead to something they didn't do because it's too risky to do otherwise.